Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. In this video, I'm going to show you guys the basics from a pro for the Bazaar.
Welcome to the Bazaar. This is gonna be fun.
So what is the Bazaar? Bazaar is a game that is going to first be playable after October 30th, and I'm going to play a whole lot of it. It's an auto battler, but there's so much customization. It's such a good roguelike experience. Never will you have a run that plays exactly the same as another run. I've played hundreds of hours in family and friends that I've been given access to, and finally when the game is out, I cannot wait to play it, and I think it is worth your time checking out. It is an auto battler, but it is also a big time character builder. The intro is really easy. You basically get items, acquire gold, improve your items, get more skills, and basically you have an auto battle experience against some enemies. Some of them are monsters, some of them are players, and it's pretty easy to get into, but the mastery is extremely high because knowing what to do given the options that you are presented each time, each hour, it actually gets pretty crazy. I feel like every single time I play Bazaar, I learn something new, and that is a pretty key ingredient to a great game in my experience. So let's get to it. I will teach you the basics of the Bazaar in this video. First off, we have items. How does a run start? Well, it starts with an item. You basically start a run. In this case, we are using footage from the videos that they've put up. It is going to be based on content that may be different from when the game is actually playable because we are not quite there yet, but I will keep it general. But I will give you guys some pro level details as well. So a run starts with you picking an item. Now, if you're playing dually, it's between one of three unique cores, but if you're picking another hero, your first choice is going to be one of three items of silver tier. Now, silver tier means that they have a silver border. Bronze means that they are one below. It's a starting tier. And some items start at a specific tier. So some items, the lowest version that you can find them might be silver, might be the next rarity gold. Some items actually start at diamond. So when a run starts, you start off with a silver item, one choice of three. And you won't really see silver items until a little bit later on in the game. So the first item that you pick is pretty significant to how you will start your run. After you pick your first item, you will pick a skill, and this skill will be a gold skill. So again, it'll be kind of like a pre-upgraded skill, and that will also be pretty significant. The skills are different for each of the different heroes, and some of them I think are similar or the same when it comes to like the weapon skills, but you can also get monster skills. So some of the monsters that you face throughout the game, you can actually get their skills as you play the game. Now, as you play the game, most moments in the game you are given the choice between one of three things, and it gets pretty interesting when you get to there. You can sometimes actually encounter monsters among your three choices, and when you do battle a monster, it's very similar to battling a player, with the main difference that the monsters have fixed items, fixed health, and fixed like rewards in a way. So combat starts, the items kind of go off cooldown. They start at 0, so if an item has a cooldown of 4, it takes 4 seconds into the fight until it actually fires off. Now, some items do damage, but the basis of the game is that you are trying to cycle these cooldowns, these items, and you want to have some kind of synergy between them and the skills that you have and the different other aspects of the game that come into play. Now, if you're lucky enough to defeat one of the monsters, the reward is always going to be one item or skill that they have. So sometimes when you're given a choice between monsters that you may fight, it might be the correct choice to choose a monster that seemingly gives you less rewards because you want to kind of take a chance at one of their items or one of their skills. And that is a pretty big deal. Now, the experience gain for monsters is all or nothing. So if the monster would give you like 3 experience on defeat, you have to actually defeat the monster to get 3 experience. If you don't defeat the monsters, you get nothing. Now, monsters also reward you gold for facing them, and the gold that you get kind of goes down with their health bar. So if they would give you like 7 gold, if you get them just past half, you'll get 3 gold, and then if you die, well, it's okay. You don't actually like lose anything other than the experience that you would have gained, but you still get the 3 gold because you got the monster that much down. Now, if you are lucky enough and you do defeat the monster, you get a level up, and the level up rewards are different for each hero, but they do, again, have some similarities. Some level up rewards are going to be like get a random weapon, get like something like that. Now, those are going to be based on class items. Now, some items are class-based. Like if you're playing Vanessa, for example, Vanessa has her own set of items. There are also some neutral items, but not all that many. A really key part of the game is kind of overcoming the weaknesses of a particular hero with items from a different hero. And this can be achieved through like kind of like RNG rewards. It can be achieved through very rare vendors or events, and taking advantage of those is really kind of the mastery level of play that you will slowly acquire as you play the game. Now, as combat looks pretty simple, there are a lot of details to it that are important to consider. First off, you can actually win by stalling out your opponent. Bazaar is an awesome game where you can actually just have a lot of health, or have, in this case, a lot of shield, and we'll go over what that is in a moment. And you can win because after a certain moment in combat, the sandstorm begins. And the sandstorm is kind of like a damage over time that ramps up every single second to more and more damage, and basically is kind of like the enraged timer of any fight. So you can actually win the Bazaar by, I don't know, kind of playing the property game with Pig and having a high econ and having just a lot of health. And if your opponent can't do enough damage to you, you can let the sandstorm do damage to them. You don't actually need to build around the damage, and that's kind of like the magic of the Bazaar that I really like. Now, as you acquire more and more items, you will actually notice that you have a stash. So with the stash, you have a little bit more room. There are some items that actually work from your stash, so there's a little bit of kind of like opportunity cost to keeping too many items saved up. But there's also a pretty smart thing about, kind of saving up a few things, because when you encounter like your choice of 3 things when an hour begins, we'll go over that in a second, if you pick like a vendor, you want to make sure that you have enough gold to actually buy the things that the vendor might give you. And sometimes you'll get like a skill vendor too, so that's pretty good. Now, I'm sure you guys are asking, it's like, well, okay, what about PvP? Is there PvP in this game? Yes. So there is a player encounter. You will face players at the top of the day, top of the hour, and we'll explain that in a second. So you have the player encounter, and the player encounter is kind of like the ghost of the player. The game has kind of a timing session, and basically it's an asymmetric combat, so it's not like a live PvP, but your point in the game, how much you've played this run, you will play another player's build of that same moment in time. So they should have relatively similar power levels as you do. And, there is some information that you can gather. So we can kind of go into this screenshot here, and I can kind of explain a few things. When a PvP encounter is about to begin, it is kind of like the top of the hour in the day. And when you hover over them, you can actually get a little bit of information. So you can see their name, you can see their level, you can see their prestige, and you can see how many wins they have. So let's talk about these mechanics. So what is the hour system? So it is that little kind of wheel there to the left. And basically what happens is on every hour something happens. Now the first the first 5 of the 6 hours, it is going to be like some kind of PvE encounter. It might be a selection of vendors, a selection of events, a selection of monster encounters. You're basically trying to power up your hero throughout these events and basically try to make the best choices that you can with what you have. And every time it goes top of the hour, it is going to be a player encounter. When you play that player, you play their ghost, and their ghost is gone from the system. So if I have some super crazy build, and then someone like you guys end up playing it, that'll be the only time someone else will play against that build on that moment. So it'll be kind of like a one-of. That fleeting moment is really cool. I think we'll have moments where it's like, oh my god, Kripp, I faced your crazy god build. And even though you might lose, you kind of get to see, you get to knock it out of the system, and you're the one that had to unfortunately face that one crazy build. So it has kind of that cool excitement about it because it is a fleeting experience. Now, if you win, you basically get a win. And that is, again, when you hover over the portrait, you can see those blue notches. That's how many wins your next opponent has. Now, your wins are listed above the hour and day system, so above that clock thingy. Now, a run is over when you get 10 wins, or you die. We'll explain the death moment in a second here. So if you get 10 wins, your run is over, and you have basically achieved the maximum number of wins. And it doesn't really matter if you lose a few and then you win 10 in a row, or you win and lose and eventually get to 10. But it does mean that sometimes you will have a run that is won on day 10, and sometimes you will have a run that is completed, won on like day 18 or day 17 or something. Now on day 10, you will face players on the 10th day. Their builds will obviously be significantly weaker than they are going to be on like day 17. On day 17, you're going to need some really crazy stuff, and there's going to be a lot of strategy in adapting your build to kind of push it into the crazy tier on those higher days in order for you to actually get some wins. So what happens when you lose? So they have this prestige system that's, again, kind of under that cogwheel. In this case, we have very little prestige left. So you start with 20, and if you don't lose any, you have a flawless run. It is a perfect victory, a 10-0. So you have no faults in your run, no prestige lost. You were a champion of the Bazaar with no slip-ups whatsoever. Now, if you lose prestige. If you lose a player encounter, you lose prestige based on the day. So if you start off and you lose on the first day's player encounter, you're going to go from 20 prestige, which is the starting amount, to 19. And then you lose again. Well, a day 2 loss is going to cost you 2 points. You're going to go to 17. Will you lose again? Well, you go to 14. Will you lose again? You go to 10. Will you lose again? You go to 5. Will you lose again? Well, you die, right? Wrong. So there is actually a res event in the Bazaar where you basically, instead of dying, you just go down to 1 prestige. It doesn't matter how much damage you take. If you would die, you just go to 1 for the first time. Oh, so it only happens once. And you get this res event where you get to choose between one of 3 really significant power-ups, and one of those power-ups is to enchant an item, which is like adding a huge amount of power to it. So that is like a really big deal. So if you get this, you're probably not going to lose your next day. From experience, you're probably not going to lose your next day. And if you see a player who has like 1 prestige left, that probably means that they have actually acquired this buff. So even though you might have a terrible run and you're just losing and losing and losing the player encounters, you're still actually going to have a pretty cool experience of putting a build together and kind of going through this adventure. And even though you're going to lose sometimes, just like every single run, when you get that 6th loss and actually die but have your res event, a day 6 res event means you're probably not losing day 7. So you're going to get that experience. It's one of the best games where you can lose super badly and still have an adventure and still have a lot of fun. And again, that's kind of the magic of the Bazaar. They've really done that system very well. All right. Income is another mechanic just to quickly talk about. So you're going to get gold through a lot of the events. You're going to get gold through the monster encounters, but you also get gold when the day rolls over, and that's going to be based on your income. The income is in the lower right. Now the base income is 5, so when the day rolls over, you just get 5 gold. There are events and things that you can do to increase your income, but largely it is a mechanic that is utilized by Pygmalion, which is one of the 3 heroes. He has things that are based off of and can increase the income that he has pretty significantly. The other heroes engage the mechanic a little bit more lightly, and it's just a little bit of extra gold. Gold is very important. You always want to have some gold. You always want to float some gold, because when you click on an event and your next one comes up, if you're at 0, you may not be able to take full advantage of the 3 options presented to you, because it might be like a really rare shop vendor, but you might have no gold in order to buy anything. So it's going to be a constant battle to make the most out of every single turn, but also have some left over to not waste an opportunity on the following hour. Now, the basic mechanics of the different items, we'll just quickly go over it. So there is health. Health is how much damage you can take before you die. It's pretty simple. When you level up, it goes up by a certain amount. It's a flat value based on the level, and that tends to go up pretty significantly in the later levels. And you can hover your portrait to see how much health you would gain on that next level up. There are also events that increase your health by a percentage, which are really important for some heroes and some strategies. There are some things that actually reduce your maximum health. Sometimes that can be fine based on your build, of course. And there are some pretty rare items that will actually increase your health permanently. And again, sometimes that can be a build. You can actually play a build where you stack health and do absolutely nothing else and win because you have a lot of health. That is actually a valid strategy. It's not going to beat everything, though, because some builds have like exponentially ramping damage in combat, but it's going to work pretty well. We have the shield mechanic. The shield mechanic is kind of designated by the yellow above an item. So that means it's going to shield when it goes off, or has some kind of trigger in some cases. And shield is kind of like temporary health over your health. Damage is dealt to the shield before it's dealt to your health. If you have any amount of shield up, when burn would do damage, it actually halves the amount of damage. So that is pretty cool. We'll go into that in a second. And shield is very powerful to protect against one-shots, because there are some setups that can do more damage than you have health, and shield can effectively give you more one-shot protection than you originally have health. So it's actually a very powerful mechanic. The downside is that, well, do you want to have shield or do you want to have maximum health? Maximum health will protect you from like a burst situation, while shield will later on protect you from one-shots. So you're going to have some balance there. Healing. Healing is generally not as good as shielding against most cases. It's not going to help you not get one-shotted, of course, but healing is powerful in its own way. Healing, one instance of healing, again, designated by kind of the green symbol above the item, that's a heal, light green that is. It has a cleansing effect. So when you heal, just an act of healing will remove 1 burn and 1 poison from your character, and that can be really powerful if you have a high repetition heal. So in my opinion, items that heal more frequently are stronger than items that heal in a large amount. Now, there is healing even if you have like maximum health. Like if you're at maximum health and you heal for like 50, the 50 heal still kind of triggers for the sake of your character's synergy and item triggers and all that kind of stuff. So at least that's going to work, but generally healing is not super powerful other than its cleanse effect, in my opinion. There's also the next, also even less powerful healing mechanic, which is regeneration. There's not a lot of effects that give you regeneration, but regeneration is basically you passively heal for a certain amount. Now, it's not considered healing for triggers. There's also some rare cases where you can get lifesteal on your items, like on your weapons. That's also not considered healing for the sake of triggers. Regeneration is really good early and completely useless later on. Sometimes you get an option as you go through your hero's day. You might get like some regeneration early on. That's actually going to be a lot of character power. Later on, not so much. Now, as you've probably seen, damage is just like the red value on top of an item. You just do damage and you just knock their health off. That's pretty clear. You can crit. There are mechanics that can crit. So if you crit with a normal damage source, it just does double damage. There are some triggers based off of crits that can be pretty important for your character's synergy. Damage over time can also crit. So if you have like 50% chance to crit on like an item with burn, it'll apply twice as much, and poison would work the same way. So burn, how does burn work? So an item with burn is one that has kind of like an orange icon above its damage. You can have an item that does damage and also burns at the same time. Burn damage is dealt twice per second, but every time you deal burn damage, it's reduced by 1. So if you deal like 10 burn damage and then you never deal anymore, it'll just go to 9, 8, 7, and then it'll just kind of go down to 0. Eventually won't be anything. Now, if you have a constant application of burn, it is essentially near exponential scaling of damage as the fight goes on, making burn a pretty powerful mechanic to take advantage of, especially if you have a character build that has pretty good sustain, so you can kind of stay in the fight longer and let this damage ramp up to crazy values. Now, poison also ramps up, but poison does not decay. Poison, it will not ever go away unless they have the heal. So if they heal, it goes down by just flat 1. But otherwise, it doesn't decay like burn does. So it's stronger than burn in that sense, but actually it does less damage overall because poison deals damage once per second, not twice per second, only once per second. Poison is powerful, especially against builds that focus too much on shield, because poison actually goes through shield. While shield halves the burn damage, poison just completely goes through shield. So it can counter some builds. Dually in particular is actually a little bit weak to poison because there's not a lot of healing effects and there's a pretty big reliance on shield for defenses. Some items have ammo. Ammo can be seen kind of below the item, and you can kind of clearly see how many ammo it has based on the little dots under it. If it goes off, its ammo goes down by 1. If it has no ammo left, it can still charge, so that can be useful because you can have some effects, some skills, some items that actually restore ammo to items, so the items are still going to be charging even if they don't have any ammo, and that's actually a good thing. And that also allows them to be targeted by crowd control effects. So now is where we talk about like haste and slow. Now, I couldn't find an amazing example of this through the footage that they had in their highlights, but haste and slow is probably the most important mechanic for the overall effectiveness of your build in the Bazaar. So plainly, you will see an item that's hasted in blue. It has that thing above it, and if it's slowed, it's kind of like that brown thing below it. And you can kind of see where an item is during its cooldown, like how much of its cooldown it has progressed, kind of on like that laser beam line on the item. So haste doubles the rate at which the item charges. Slow halves the rate on which an item charges. So if an item is both hasted and slowed, it's effectively charging at normal speed. If an item has like a 4-second cooldown, that means if it's hasted and slowed, it will fire every 4 seconds. If it's just slowed, it's halved, so it's going to take 8 seconds to fire. If it's not slowed and it's hasted, it's 4 seconds, goes down to 2 seconds effectively, so because it charges twice as fast. Now, why is this really good? Well, one way to think of it is if all your stuff is hasted, you do double damage. And that's true. You do double damage. If you slow all your opponent's stuff, it takes twice as long to go off. They do half damage. And yes, that's kind of true as well. It's just that that's only the case if there's no synergy. The Bazaar is all about synergy. It's all about getting the right combinations of items, the right synergy with the skills that you have as well. So really, when you think about it, it's kind of like an ARPG character. Think of it like a Diablo 4 character where you have aspects on every single piece of your gear, and let's say every aspect is contributing to like a 50% multiplier to the effectiveness of the character. When you have like 10 items, each one is kind of multiplying itself. So what that means is when you're doubling the rate at which your cooldowns goes off with like haste effects, the minimum is doubling your damage. If you have no synergy at all, you're doubling your damage. The more synergy you have, the more these multipliers play into effect. In my experience, hasting all your items permanently can easily quadruple your overall effectiveness. Slowing all your opponent's damage can easily be a damage reduction of 80%. It's not just 50%. That's very important to know. The other item kind of manipulation is item destroy. So you can destroy items. They are not permanently destroyed. They're just kind of destroyed for that combat. I don't believe there's any way that you can like recover them. And item destroy is pretty significant because let's say you have slow one item every 5 seconds, right? Now, if you destroy an item, it can't target that anymore. So you're going to have a more concentrated crowd control experience combined with destroy effects. Destroy effects are super powerful, and because of that, I expect them to be super rare, but something to consider. The last form of crowd control is freeze. Freeze is the ultimate. Freeze basically locks an item's cooldown where it is. The only thing that you can do to combat freeze is using charge effects. Charge effects, I can't really give you guys an example, but some items, they're very rare. The core, Dooley's core, will actually have some charge mechanics on it. So if it's like, use an item, charge this 1 second, that'll basically bump up where the cooldown is by that amount. So if it's charged for 1 second on a trigger, and you constantly trigger it, you can actually use an item even though it's frozen. But nothing else will work. If it's frozen, its cooldown is locked where it is, okay? And that is a really big deal. Freeze is very hard to get, it's very hard to come by, but it is the ultimate in crowd control because it locks out an item completely. Now, if an item is hasted or slowed while it's frozen, the haste effect and the slow effect actually does tick down. So there's kind of a little bit of negative synergy there, but I wouldn't worry about that too much just because all these mechanics are insanely powerful, and freeze is insanely powerful as well. Here you can kind of see what happens if you have too few items. So having small items has a pretty big advantage because, well, you can have more of them, which makes them stronger against targeted crowd control. It makes them stronger against freeze. If you have really powerful items, but they're too large, you're actually too vulnerable to crowd control. The flip side of that is, well, if you have too many small items, they can kind of multi-trigger. So if you have an item that slows all your opponent's items, and your opponent has 10 small items instead of 3 large ones, well, you get 10 triggers of slows. And if you have like burn when you slow, you burn 10 times instead of 3. So there is like an upside downside to small items and to large items in this case. Generally, in my experience, slow items are largely better. But that is going to be on a case-by-case that I encourage you guys to explore and figure out for yourselves because, well, it's going to be a game that we're going to have to figure out wholly when it is playable. But yes, all these effects of disruption are really, really powerful. And that is going to be largely how the game is played. Now, the other way the game is played is your hero. Your adventure in the Bazaar is definitely going to be very different based on the hero that you play. On the Play Bazaar website, they have kind of an intro to the 3 heroes, so I'm going to use these slides and give you a little bit of information on them. So when you first start playing Bazaar, if you're just playing for free or you just have, the base access, you're just going to have Vanessa to play. Vanessa is, they have it as a 1 difficulty, and that is pretty appropriate. Not because it's overall an easy hero to play. It's an easy hero to play because Vanessa excels at every single form of offense. And that includes just buying the best weapon that you have available to you. You can just play a whole bunch of weapons and have a powerful, successful run in the Bazaar with Vanessa. So the entry level for Vanessa is really low. You can definitely grab some good wins by just playing super simple weapon-based builds. Now, specialty of Vanessa is every form of offense works. You can play lots of weapons. You can focus on one weapon with crazy triggers. You can actually get really some of the best burn builds with Vanessa. You can get some of the best poison builds with Vanessa. You can play, builds that are just solely based on crits. You can just any kind of offense. Vanessa is amazing at it. Does have some weaknesses survivability-wise, and that can be solved through cross-class items. That can be solved through like monster skills or potent skill combinations, but that can be a little bit challenging actually. All of these heroes have a really high level of mastery to them. Next hero, Pig or Pygmalion. He's kind of like a hero that focuses on properties, on like large items in some cases. He has a lot of money. He has a lot of things that can manipulate the amount of income that he has. So he just has a lot of gold, which means that you can take better advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you during one of your runs. Pygmalion excels at pretty much everything, but I would say that generally, other than getting a lot of health, he's not really the best at any one thing. It's just that because you have a really high economy and a really high engine to keep pumping out large amounts of gold, what ends up happening is while his options are generally not as good for offense as Vanessa, his defense options are pretty good, maybe not quite as good as Dooley, but you can usually get better versions of everything because you have more money. You can just pick the more expensive items. You can just kind of pick the more expensive skills that are presented to you. In situations where Vanessa would have like 5 gold left or something, Pig would have like 50. So you can just pick the option that is not even a good idea in Vanessa's options. So that's why it's a really cool hero to play. Last hero, Dooley. So Dooley, they have as a difficulty 4. Dooley is kind of like a difficulty 5 minimum. When the game starts, you pick one of 6 cores. Each core is going to have a very unique playstyle. On top of the Bazaar being a very unique playstyle every single time you play a run, on top of that, it's kind of like learning 6 different heroes. And to be a master at Dooley, you don't have to master quite all 6, but you basically have to master 5. You don't have to pick the last core. You can actually just completely ignore one core at all times. But you have to master basically 5 different classes to kind of be a good Dooley player. Dooley excels at just cycling through items like crazy. His core, and again, there's different cores, generally have charge mechanics based on its position and reward mechanics based on its position. So you really have to be a true master of the game to take advantage of everything that Dooley has to offer. But Dooley's strengths are pretty good damage, but he can often play builds that can cycle cooldowns like crazy, which allows you to get crazy damage or crazy survivability or both, or crazy burn or crazy poison, or just everything can go to the moon with Dooley, basically. But his average run, I don't know. We'll have to see. You're going to have to be really good at the game. You have to make all the best choices, and even then, you might struggle on some runs. So it's going to be a wild one. Dooley is definitely my favorite hero. Once the game is playable and I can give you guys a lot more information and footage, I will do full hero guides as well as a whole bunch of other videos. And I want to remind you guys, this is not like sponsored or anything. This is just one of the best games that I have played in like a decade. And I cannot wait to play more, and I cannot wait to show you guys more. Hopefully, this has been a pretty good intro, get you guys started, and get started. See you next time.